Be disrespectful in there, but I had to get in my own head because I knew I'm the best. I just need to remind myself. And hey, I want to say something. Everyone back home, everyone, I don't care if you love me or hate me, stand up for yourself. People be trying to bring me down. I stood up and look at me now. No one can bring me down anymore. Stand up for yourself.
The effects a dominant champion has on their sport is always interesting and unique to see. A champion that tears through the competition with ease and shows no signs of slowing down usually divides people into two separate thought processes. One, it's incredible to watch this champion perform and to witness history in the making. And two, I cannot wait to see this guy lose and for someone else to become the champ. Alexander Volkanovski certainly fitted into the dominant champion mold. His blend of high fight IQ, fantastic technical ability, and physical prowess made him a force to be reckoned with against any opponent. For the past 4 years, Volk has went on a terrific championship run that put his name up there with the greats of not only his division, but MMA in general. However, after losing his title this past weekend in violent fashion, and being in the older age bracket for a featherweight fighter, the question must be asked: should Alexander Volkanovski retire? Volkanovski would start his professional MMA career in 2012. He would go on a 10-fight winning streak before signing with the UFC in 2016. Volk would go on to destroy the unranked featherweight competition the UFC had to offer, until he faced former title challenger Chad Mendes. This would become Volk's first true test in the UFC, as he would go on to have a 2-round war with Mendes. Not only was Volk's fighting ability tested in this match, but we would also learn about one of Volk's greatest attributes here, and that is his heart. Volkanovski would take everything Mendes had to offer until Mendes had nothing left. Volk would swarm him and get the TKO victory, shooting him up to the top of the division. After defeating the living legend in Jose Aldo, Volkanovski would go on to face Max Holloway for the featherweight championship. Alexander Volkanovski would go on to defeat Holloway by unanimous decision and become the 4th undisputed featherweight champion in UFC history. Of course, everyone would agree and say that Volkanovski's reign as champ was impressive and commanding, but it wouldn't necessarily start that way. Volk would rematch Max Holloway at UFC 251. It was clear from the get-go that Max had adjusted his game plan for Volk for the second outing, and he would comfortably win the first 2 rounds of this fight. But, as all greats do, Volkanovski would make excellent in-fight adjustments and win the last 3 rounds on 2 of the judges' scorecards, handing Volkanovski the split decision win and his first successful title defense. This decision would rub a lot of fans the wrong way. Many people online would disagree with the judges' decision and would quickly turn on Volk because of it. It didn't help that Max was and still is a beloved fan favorite for many. The eyes are now on Volk to silence the critics and show the world who he is. And his next 5 fights would do exactly that. First, he would destroy Brian Ortega by schooling him in every aspect of striking. Ortega would have a famous moment of success when he dropped Volkanovski and put him in a deep guillotine. The fight seemed to be a wrap, but as previously stated, the heart of Volkanovski would prevail again, and he would fight out of multiple submission attempts and make Ortega pay for every one of them. After this, he would annihilate Korean Zombie, TKOing him in the 4th round. This was a short notice fight for KZ, and it was clear there were multiple levels between him and Alexander the Great. But now, it was time for the trilogy match against Max Holloway. The previous 2 fights these men had were high-level and close technical matchups, and everyone was excited to see what adjustments both of them would make for the 3rd fight. A lot of people were also excited to see Max Holloway's revenge, as they still believed he was robbed of a victory in the 2nd matchup. These people would not get to see Max Holloway's revenge. To put it simply, Volk figured out Max. At no point was this fight close. Volk had an answer for every single thing Max would try, and anytime Max would try something new, Volk would just adjust and start having success again. This fight would begin the conversation of just how good Volkanovski truly is. He just dominated Max Holloway, marking his 3rd win against him, and he was now 4 title defenses deep without a real number 1 contender to fight next. Volkanovski was now ready for greatest of all time status, and one of the best ways to do that is to become a double champion. It was time to face the lightweight champion, Islam Makhachev. Of course, Alexander Volkanovski would be a major underdog heading into this matchup. Islam Makhachev is a nightmare matchup for anyone. His suffocating wrestling style is already enough for people to not want to fight him. But in addition, his understanding of distance and counter-striking abilities make him a tricky challenge to fight on the feet as well. Volk would go into this fight as a significant underdog. He's undersized and will have a physicality and wrestling disadvantage. But it was time for the two pound-for-pound best to go at it. Volk would go on to have an amazing account of himself. He surprisingly held his own in the grappling department, appearing to be just as strong as Islam in the clinch. The fight was close and many believed that Volk did enough to win, but ultimately Islam would get the decision, snapping Volk's overall 22-fight win streak. Although he did not achieve double champ status, Volk's stock would only grow after this fight, as he gave a great account of himself against an opponent he was supposed to have very little chance against. Volk would go back to the featherweight division against the dangerous finisher in Yair Rodriguez. Volk's age would start to become more of a conversation in the MMA community, as he is 34, about to be 35. A stat would come out stating that the record of UFC fighters that were 35 or older in title fights below middleweight was 2 wins and 28 losses. Age catches up to everyone in sports, but especially so in the lighter weight classes of combat sports. However, the difference between other sports and combat sports is that when an athlete begins to fade, it's usually a depressing and brutal decline where the athletes refuse to retire and instead take more and more damage until they are forced out of the sport. People were concerned that the loss against Islam and the slowly creeping age would be the beginning of the end for Volkanovski. But he would silence the doubt for a while longer as he made the fight against Yair Rodriguez look easy, making the statement once again that he is leagues better than everyone else at 145. The story of Alexander Volkanovski is one of many highs, but currently we see ourselves in the lowest moment. Volkanovski would rematch Islam in another attempt for double champ status. Volk would be heading into this fight on 11 days' notice, as Islam's original opponent Charles Oliveira had to pull out due to a cut he received in training. Volk would go into this fight with more disadvantages than he even had in the first Islam fight. But we all know what he's capable of. This fight is still compelling, and everyone was on the edge of their seat to see if Volk could overcome the disadvantages and deliver one of the greatest victories in MMA. As you are probably aware, Volk would not be able to get the job done. In fact, he would go on to get knocked out cold in the first round by a head kick. This was the worst case scenario for Volk. All the media pundits before the fight questioned whether stepping up on short notice was a good idea or not. Now, not only has Volkanovski suffered 2 losses in his last 3 fights and has been knocked out in front of millions of people, he may never get the opportunity at the lightweight crown again. Volkanovski planned to get back into the win column quickly by accepting a featherweight fight 4 months after his KO loss. He would face the young surging contender Ilia Topuria in the main event of UFC 298. Once again, many were skeptical if the turnaround was too quick after getting finished only months prior, but Volk was gunning for greatness. A win against Topuria would make his claim for featherweight GOAT even stronger, as he would have defended his title against an opponent from the generation before him, his generation, and the generation after him as well. However, as we witnessed this last weekend, the gamble once again did not pay off. After having a successful first round, Volkanovski would be knocked out cold by a Topuria right hook in the second round. It is difficult to know when to call it a career in sports, but MMA more specifically. Fighters don't want to believe that their time is over, and will continue to fight and lose over and over again. Alexander Volkanovski has now lost his featherweight crown, and has brought on the new era of featherweight contenders. Volk has already stated that he has no plans to retire and wants an immediate rematch with Ilia Topuria. The reality is that by the time Volk will be ready to fight again, he will be 36 years old. This sport is a young man's game, and suffering 2 KO losses in the same 6-month span is a sign that the sport is catching up with Volkanovski. Although it is true that Volk can absolutely still compete in this featherweight landscape and could potentially become a champion again, it would be for the best if Volk quit while he was still ahead, and people could remember his career as a whole fondly. Ride out on top, and don't make the same mistake many athletes do in this sport. But, no matter what he decides to do, thank you for everything, Alexander Volkanovski.